this article, I argue that looking at lesser-known intellectuals can help the history of economics uncover new ways of seeing the world. My focus is the beginning of Indian economics in the late 19th century and its conceptualization of development. These Indian economists, despite their elite status in India, were from an imperial context where they were not considered economists. Studies throughout the 20th century have continued to treat them only as nationalists, rarely as contributors to economic knowledge. And that's what I'm trying to change. So my research gives agency to these economists. I show how the position of these Indian economists from the margins of discursive space offered a unique perspective that enabled them to innovate at the margins of development discourse. So what did they do? The Indian economists redefined the concept of universality in the existing 19th century idea of development, right? By rejecting the idea or the widely accepted comparative advantage model and assertion that progress originated in Europe. Moreover, the economists, these Indian economists, pushed for universal industrialization even for India, even for imperial territories, arguing that universal progress was beneficial to all. Hence their idea of this win-win idea of development. In the late 19th century, in this period of time which I'm studying, the widely accepted idea was that the idea of progress and development originated in Europe. And not only that, but progress and development, or modernization, we could call it, had also started in Europe. So the idea started in Europe, and the process started in Europe, and then it would spread to the rest of the world, to Russia, America, and the rest of the world. But the Indian economists in the late 19th century witnessed something else. They started to realize that British colonialism was regressing India, it was impoverishing its industries, and consequently its people. Progress was not spreading to India. In other words, neither did the history books that they read describe a poor subcontinent. They rather spoke of manufactured goods being exported across the world. I mean, even European travel accounts at this time spoke of a thriving society in India. So the Indian economists didn't agree with that reading of, global history. Indian economists and Indian economics then in this period emerged as a result of this clash. The economists and their studies in India at this time were ultimately placed under the umbrella of Indian economics, and they fought against this dominant Eurocentric idea that India was backward and had to wait for progress and development. The Indian economists said that India could only progress if the appropriate policies were put into place. India could build a modern industry which would enrich its population and the world with its products and with its demand, right? Because in turn, the wealthier Indian population would increase global demand and ultimately aid Britain's and other Western nations' industrialization, or continued industrialization. And so here is their win-win model of development, universal industrialization. So while Ricardo's comparative advantage model that advocated for an industrial West and an agricultural East, the Indian economists saw that as a disadvantage to all. The Indian economists were even critiquing their own idol, Friedrich List, when they prescribed industrialization to the East, right? Because List did not see industrialization possible in the East. So the Indian economists then uncovered this idea of a win-win model of global development, but they also uncovered the drain of Indian resources by colonization and dependence that the colonization created. So the Indian dependence on the empire Britain. So India was regressing, not due to some inherent weakness that India had, but due to imperial policies. So what's significant here is that Indian economics was able to merge nationalism with universalism, right? And often in economics, historically at least, we've seen those as opposing things, right? Either an economist is nationalist, they think about the well-being of its nation, and it kind of stops at its borders, or you think about these universalist laws, processes that happen amongst all people across the world. Indian economics idea of development was both nationalistic, and then in that it's content was about India, right, and this colonial territory, and universalist in that it defined certain universal criteria that brought about societal change in many different societies, not just India. The configuration of, then to be more specific, of economic nationalism in Indian economics includes two distinct elements. On the one hand, you have development that should be collective and equal. And on the other hand, you should have this long run goal of a universal society of free trade. So first, the nation should be prioritized over any individual. It was important to implement a development and plan that catered to the well-being of the collective and minimized inequality. But then once industrialized, once the infant industries had been given protection and could become internationally competitive, the country could open up to free trade in order for all countries to benefit from this free exchange. So in sum, I argue that my analysis illustrates that a nuanced account of the differences between various interlocutors across the world can uncover discursive innovation and potentially useful new ways of viewing development. Because if we fast forward to our current context of backlash against globalization and return to nationalist politics, the Indian win-win model of development could remind us that nationalism is not at odds with more universalist international goals of development. Rather, we can experience and see both universal ways generally applicable to all societies and specific or unique characteristics applicable to certain time periods and spaces.